Enter the world of forensic science, the science of crime, where a suspect's guilt or innocence can hang on a single piece of evidence. Can you ever trust someone who has killed before, even if he has served the time and paid his debt to society? Can he ever really be a citizen above suspicion? In 1978, a high-class prostitute was found murdered. The cause of death was asphyxia due to strangulation.
And what this means is that when there is a force applied to the neck, the blood from the face cannot escape anymore, and you get bleeding points in and around the eyes. And of course that means ligature strangulation.
An eyewitness said on the night of the murder, she heard yelling and saw a man straddling the prostitute and yelling, "Die, bitch, die." The man's name was Brett Morgan. Because he was allegedly drunk at the time, Morgan was convicted of the lesser charge of manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years. In prison, Morgan met a convicted sex offender named Larry Fisher. Morgan would later remember a particular conversation in which Fisher told him the best way to get away with a rape and a murder was to let some other guy take the rap for it. The other guy taking the rap for the rape and murder was named David Milgaard. But a review of the biological evidence seemed to support Milgaard's claim that he was innocent.
You cannot link the body fluids of Mr. Milgaard with the body, and there are no bloodstains on him or on his clothing which would link him with the scene or the body.
The Supreme Court of Canada ordered a review of the Milgaard case. That's when Brett Morgan came back into the story. Morgan testified against the inmate who had confessed to the rape and murder. But there was an unexpected silver lining. In the courtroom that day was an Ottawa journalist, Elaine Wallace, who had contributed to Milgaard's defense fund. As Elaine would later write in her diary about watching Brett Morgan testify that day, "I was so impressed with him. His calm manner and strong shoulders, a very brave man." At that time, Elaine Wallace was living with her boyfriend, Michael Laurier. Within a week, Elaine wrote Morgan a letter in prison. Another followed, and he eventually replied. As Elaine got to know Morgan, she was impressed with his character and believed he deserved early parole. She started a one-woman campaign to free Morgan. Michael Laurier didn't approve of Elaine's campaign, and they soon broke up. She was falling in love with Morgan. They started having conjugal visits in a prison-supervised motorhome. Eventually, Elaine succeeded in getting Morgan early parole. He moved into her house, and they began a fairy tale existence. She bought him a truck so he could start his own business as a handyman. Now he had himself a real home and his own business, and a real girlfriend who loved him. Six months after they moved in together, Elaine drove her Jeep out into the Gatineau Hills near Ottawa for the weekend to visit friends. She was never seen alive again. Search parties failed to find any clues about her disappearance. But Brett Morgan refused to give up. In July, 2.5 months later, Brett Morgan stumbled on a gruesome discovery. Exhibit A, human remains found scattered in the woods. To determine if the remains are those of Elaine Wallace, a forensic identification team scours the area to collect all of the bones. What remains of the jaw and teeth are sent to a forensic dentist for identification.
Initially, I received the skull, the lower jaw, and the majority of teeth except 5. The conclusions are really quite simple in this case because we had photographic evidence as well as the dental records. Her dentition was so particular that we could see this in photographs.
It was Elaine Wallace. Meanwhile, to determine the cause of death, the rest of the bones are sent to a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Kathy Reichs.
What I do is I work on the bones, and I'm brought into cases where the pathologist can't do a normal autopsy because the body is just a bones, or the body is burned or mummified or badly decomposed, or perhaps it's just body parts.
Kathy Reichs also happens to be a best-selling mystery writer.
Being a writer perhaps makes me more aware of details, of looking at very, very minor details that I might have ignored.
Some of these details concern the effect of seasonal changes on a victim.
The victim went missing in April, and the remains were recovered in July. That's spring. You've got a lot of things going on in the spring. You've got insects becoming very active. You've got scavenging animals becoming very active, as well as the natural elements of the rain and the melting snow and, the things that are occurring at that time of year. All of that contributed to making the recovery difficult.
Nothing was going to be easy about this case. Though Elaine's body was found in July, Morgan had gone to police back in April when she first disappeared.
Morgan started off the interview with John Savage and I by saying, "I'm going to be right up front with you. I've killed a woman before. I killed a hooker in Alberta in 1978. That set me back.
It's hard not to be suspicious of someone who has once been convicted of murder, but investigators didn't want to jump to conclusions.
He had a very calm way about him, a very low voice, very gentlemanly.
Morgan describes the days leading up to Elaine's disappearance. He explains that Friday night, Elaine got a call from her ex-boyfriend, Michael Laurier. After talking to Laurier for what Morgan says was an hour, Elaine announced that she had decided to go to the Gatineaus to visit him and his daughter and some other friends. The next morning, Saturday, Morgan said he withdrew money from a cash machine around 1. So by the time he helped Elaine load up the car and saw her off, it must have been 2 p.m. After she left, he had lunch with a friend, went for a bike ride, and had dinner in downtown Ottawa. The next day, Sunday, He became alarmed when he got a call from Michael Laurier saying Elaine hadn't showed up at all that weekend. On the Monday, police found Elaine's Jeep in the Gatineaus. They found her ID, her bank card, and 2 presents she had brought for Michael Laurier and his daughter. But there were no signs of her, no footprints, nothing at all. Now suspecting foul play, the detective asks if anyone would want to hurt Elaine. Morgan mentions that after he started living with Elaine, Michael Laurier always seemed to be bumping into them. Morgan is suspicious that Michael Laurier has never gotten over Elaine. There is one more potential suspect, Larry Fisher.
Morgan told my partner and I that he perceived that perhaps Larry Fisher might have done something to harm him, and in fact may have some involvement in the disappearance of his girlfriend.
The ex-boyfriend and the inmate need to be investigated. When police break the news about Elaine's disappearance to Michael Laurier, he seems overly emotional. He maintains he spent the entire weekend with his daughter and that Elaine never made it up to his place. Police would need to check out his alibi.
Maybe she had made it up there. Maybe there had been a confrontation. Maybe the ex-boyfriend had killed her.
Was it jealousy for being rejected in favor of Morgan that caused Michael Laurier to lure her up to the Gatineaus to kill her? And what about the other possible suspect, Larry Fisher? Investigators learn that Larry Fisher is out on parole and could have committed the crime. They try to track him down. Meanwhile, Morgan, desperate to find out anything about Elaine, goes directly to the media.
He was talking a lot to the media, telling the media that my honey has gone missing and I will do everything I can to find her, preparing missing persons photos with the victim's picture, her description, what she was last seen wearing, what she was last seen driving, and actually went up to the area of Quebec and posted these missing persons photos.
But as helpful as he is, police still can't rule Morgan out as a suspect.
We asked Morgan if his girlfriend had a will. He walked down to the bedroom where they kept their financial records, and within 30 seconds, he pulls a will out of a filing cabinet, like that. The will was made out by hand, by her, bequeathing everything to Brett Morgan.
Morgan intensifies his search for Elaine. In early June, approximately 1 month after Elaine disappeared, Morgan is approached by a recent graduate from a private investigator's course. Her name is Corinne Renaud. She offers to meet and discuss the case to help him find Elaine. Little does Corinne realize that this story is about to take another bizarre twist. Morgan and the recently graduated private investigator Corinne Renaud meet several times to discuss the case. Meanwhile, police have checked out Michael Laurier's alibi, and he's cleared. They also learned that Larry Fisher was picked up by police out west on the night that Elaine went missing. Larry Fisher is also ruled out. Police now zero in on Brett Morgan, especially after detective work uncovers a huge hole in Morgan's account of the day Elaine left. Morgan told police he went to the cash machine around 1 and that Elaine left around 2. But records from the cash machine show that Morgan, using Elaine's only bank card, made his withdrawal around 3. This same bank card was found locked in Elaine's abandoned Jeep. How could she have left around 2, as he said, if Morgan made a withdrawal with her only bank card at 3?
At that point, Brett Morgan was the prime suspect.
Detective Palfer learns of Corinne's involvement and arranges a meeting with the private eye. They tell her what they know about Morgan and ask her to help them nail him. Even though it may be dangerous, Corinne agrees. Now it's time to set a trap. The bait, Elaine's money. They enlist Elaine's bank manager in their scheme.
I had the bank manager call Morgan at home and tell him, with respect to his assets in the home and the mortgage, a person cannot be declared dead until they're missing for 7 years. And so basically, unless that body is found, nothing will happen for 7 years. And he wanted the money, so I think that really pushed him to say to himself, I better find that body.
In July, 2.5 months after Elaine disappeared, Morgan and Corinne take a drive into the Gatineau Hills. He's determined to find Elaine's body. But Morgan has grown suspicious of Corinne. He's testing her, and she knows it. What he doesn't know is that she's wired. What she and the police don't know is what else he may have planned. A surveillance vehicle follows them. But Morgan eludes them and turns up a side road, where he comes to a dead end. He jumps out and heads into the bush. "50 yards in, he comes upon the grisly remains. Investigators can hear Morgan carrying on. He says he knows it is Elaine by the clothing. This is after a horde of officers and civilians have been searching the area for over 2 months. Corinne is terrified. Is he planning to kill her too? To her relief, Morgan wants to leave and report this to the police. The next morning, he's arrested and charged with the murder of Elaine Wallace. But to get a conviction, investigators need to prove a rock-solid motive. That's when forensic accountant Gary Tim enters the picture.
We're in the practice of forensic and investigative accounting. It's a practice where we conduct investigations of a financial nature, anything from fraud, money laundering, drug proceeds, to murder matters. The main thing I would believe that forensic accounting established was the financial motive with respect to Mr. Morgan.
Gary Tim produces a chart that shows Elaine's bank balance in blue and her line of credit in red. Prior to Morgan's release, Elaine always had a positive bank balance indicated on the chart in blue. But after he moved in, her bank balance diminished and her debt grew substantially to the tune of $25,000, indicated in red.
What this appeared to do was start putting more financial pressure on both victim and, because she put it back onto Mr. Morgan.
This is what detectives believe had really happened on that Saturday morning that Elaine was supposed to leave for the Gatineau Hills. Morgan had been conning Elaine about repaying her the $25,000 he owed her. Worse, she had discovered he had been forging her signature and taking money from her account. Investigators believe Elaine was planning to report Morgan to authorities. If she did, he'd be back in jail. Morgan wanted to prevent that at any cost. Knowing that she was going to visit Michael Laurier that weekend, Morgan came up with a plan to frame Elaine's ex-boyfriend. Elaine never saw it coming. Police believe Morgan murdered Elaine somewhere in the house. Then Morgan dumped her body near Michael Laurier's house, abandoned the Jeep nearby, then rode his bike back to the city. As to the cause of death, because Morgan had covered his crimes so well, it presented a difficult problem for the forensic team. In fact, it would be what Kathy Reichs could not find that would be very revealing.
Because I found no bullet holes, I found no knife stab marks, I found no blunt instrument fractures to the bones, we thought perhaps strangulation might have been a very high probability. There's a little tiny bone in the throat called the hyoid bone, and often in manual strangulation, that's fractured. And that bone had not been recovered on the first scene recovery. So that's why we went back the second time to see if we could find the hyoid bone. Unfortunately, it's a very tiny little bone, and unfortunately, we're not able to recover it.
But given that Morgan had once strangled a prostitute, investigators are able to make a circumstantial case that Morgan had killed Elaine the same way.
It wasn't based on physical evidence. It was based on the ability of the prosecution to construct from circumstantial evidence a feasible explanation of what happened to this victim. And in constructing that, they used opinions from the pathologist, from the dentist, from the anthropologist, from the entomologist. They didn't have the traditional hair and fiber or blood spatter, the physical evidence that's always often important, but they had enough of it that they could put together circumstantially from these expertise to construct a convincing scenario.
Despite the difficulties in proving a totally circumstantial case, Brett Morgan was convicted of first-degree murder.
And you can't help but feel an empathy for the helpless victim who is weaker, who is in no way asked to bring this kind of violence on themselves. And I think that was the case here.
I was extremely saddened by the fact that another human being reached out the way she did to assist this man, to get him out of jail, to pay his legal bills, to give him thousands of dollars to set up a business, to be his friend, his lover. He totally conned her, and then because he wasn't satisfied with the amount of money he was receiving, or perhaps their relationship wasn't what he thought it was going to be, he decided to kill her and just cast her aside like an animal.
Morgan had killed before and was granted early parole only to kill again. To think that it cost a generous soul her life challenges the decision to give a killer a second chance. The stories on Exhibit A are based on true cases. The forensic scientists and investigators are the actual individuals who worked on each case. The names of the victims are fictitious. The names of the guilty are real.